The night was eerily still, broken only by the rush of a restless river under the pale moon. A woman in torn silk stood at its edge, clutching a crying newborn. Her eyes flickered with rage and fear. With one trembling breath, she whispered something no one would ever hear, and hurled the baby into the dark water below. The splash vanished too quickly, too silently. But the river did not stay calm for long. Its waves began to glow, shimmering with something alive, something ancient. Because what she had just thrown away wasn't an ordinary child. It was the daughter of the river goddess herself. The river had always been more than water to the villagers. It was life, legend, and silent witness to their sins. They called it Nira, the breathing one, because every generation claimed to see her moods change with the hearts of those who lived by her banks. When joy reigned, her waves sang. When deceit spread, she grew murky and restless. At the edge of this sacred river stood a modest home of clay and love, belonging to Aira, a young woman whose gentleness made even the elders speak kindly of her. Her laughter was rare but pure, the kind that seemed to lift dust motes into sunlight. Her husband, Rahil, was a fisherman, hard-working, quiet, and known to vanish for days at a time to earn enough for their simple life. They were poor, yes, but their hearts were rich with patience. Aira's greatest dream was to become a mother. For years, her arms longed for a child she could hold close, something to fill the quiet space Rahil's absences left behind. And when her wish finally came true, the entire village rejoiced. The pregnancy seemed almost blessed. The crops grew greener, the air smelled sweeter, and even the river Nira ran unusually clear. But not everyone celebrated. When Rahil returned home with a woman named Saira, everything changed. Saira was sharp where Aira was soft, adorned where Aira was simple, and ambitious where Aira was content. She was not from the village, she came from the city, where her beauty had once been admired and her pride fed by attention. Yet here, by the quiet river, she felt invisible. Rahil claimed he married Saira out of pity. Her family was gone and she had nowhere else to go. But whispers told a different story. The villagers said Rahil had been bewitched by Saira's charm, that she had poisoned his mind with sweet lies. Aira, heartbroken but bound by tradition, accepted her fate and treated Saira like a sister. She never complained, not even when her husband began to spend more time with the new wife. Saira, however, saw Aira's kindness as weakness. The pregnant woman's calmness irritated her. The way people admired Aira's grace, how they called her blessed by Nira, made Saira's envy burn deeper. And soon, strange things began happening. Each dawn, the river's mist would creep closer to Aira's house, wrapping around it like a shield. Whenever Aira washed her feet in the stream, the water would shimmer faintly as if the river herself recognized her. Birds followed her when she walked. The old women began to murmur that the child in her womb was not ordinary, that Nira had chosen to bless her. Saira laughed it off, but secretly the idea terrified her. She began to resent the unborn baby. One night, while Rahil was away at sea, Saira dreamt of standing by the river as waves rose high enough to touch her face. A woman's voice echoed from the depths, a sound both tender and commanding. "You are standing on sacred ground," the voice warned. "Do not harm what is mine." Saira woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding. She told herself it was just a dream. Days passed and Aira went into labor. The midwife arrived, the candles burned low and screams filled the small home. Outside, the river roared louder than ever, as if pushing life along with her. When the baby was finally born, a girl with eyes bright as sunlight on water, the midwife gasped. "She's special," the woman whispered. "Her pulse matches the rhythm of the river." Aira wept tears of joy, clutching the child close. Saira stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. In that moment, a spark of something cruel was born in her heart. The days after the birth were filled with both celebration and unease. The river stayed unusually high, its current swift but clear. The baby rarely cried. When she did, the sound echoed like a soft melody, soothing even the animals nearby. People said she carried Nira's song within her. Saira watched this with growing bitterness. She had tried for months to gain Rahil's attention, to make him love her as he once did Aira, but now, even when he looked at her, his eyes were distant, his thoughts tangled with the newborn's miraculous charm. The village's praise for Aira and the child became unbearable. She began avoiding the baby's presence. The sound of that gentle coo felt like mockery. The child's serene eyes seemed to know her secrets, to silently accuse her of envy. As jealousy turned into something darker, the river itself began to change. The nights grew colder, the water more turbulent. Once, when Sarah drew water for cooking, she thought she saw a reflection that wasn't her own. A pale woman with silver hair watching her from below the surface. When she blinked, it vanished. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps. Every gust of wind sounded like whispers from the riverbanks. She started believing the villagers' talk, that the baby belonged to the river goddess, Nira, herself. That Era's child was chosen, divine. That one day, the baby would rise above them all. Blessed and untouchable, that thought consumed her. The following week, Rahil prepared for another long fishing journey, promising to return before the moon's next full glow. Before leaving, he told both women to look after each other, and especially after the baby. His words, meant with love, only deepened the divide between them. When he left, the house fell silent except for the baby's gentle breathing. Syra began noticing things. Small, impossible things. The baby's cradle would rock softly on its own. The bowl of water near the bed would shimmer even when untouched. Once she spilled milk on the floor and it curved around the baby's feet as though unwilling to soil her. Each incident pushed her closer to madness. One evening, as the sun set behind a blood-red horizon, Syra caught Era humming by the riverbank, cradling the baby. The golden light wrapped around them like a blessing. In that moment, Era looked almost divine, too pure, too untouchable. Syra's chest burned with fury. She turned away before Era could see her. That night she made a decision that would change everything. She convinced herself it was mercy, that she would be freeing the world from something unnatural. But deep down she knew it was jealousy, raw and consuming. Over the next few days she planned carefully. She waited for the perfect moment when Era would be asleep, the moon high and the river at its fullest. The night came. The air was thick and heavy with silence. The baby's soft cries echoed through the dimly lit house. Syra moved like a shadow, her footsteps soundless on the cold floor. She paused at Era's bedside, watching her breathe, peaceful and unaware, then turned her gaze toward the cradle. The baby opened her eyes. For a heartbeat, Syra froze. Those eyes, clear as crystal water, seemed to hold galaxies. The faint sound of waves filled the room, though the river was far away. Syra's breath quickened. "It's only a child," she whispered to herself. But deep down she knew she was lying. She lifted the baby carefully, her heart pounding. The little one didn't cry. She only looked up at Syra, calm and knowing. Outside, the river sound grew louder, as if sensing what was about to happen. And with that, Syra stepped into the night, the baby in her arms. Walking toward the riverbank where destiny waited, the moon watched silently that night, veiled by drifting clouds as Syra crept toward the riverbank. Each step sank into the wet earth, leaving behind prints that filled instantly with water. The baby's weight in her arms felt strange, light yet heavy, fragile yet alive with warmth. The village was asleep, unaware that their quiet world was shifting toward tragedy. Even the dogs didn't bark. Even the wind held its breath. The closer she got to the river, the louder it grew. The waters that had always whispered now seemed to speak. The currents twisted and turned as if restless. It was as though the river knew. Syra stopped at the edge. The moonlight caught the rippling surface, turning it silver and alive. She looked down at the baby. The infant's eyes were open, gazing into the darkness with a calm that made Syra tremble. For a moment her resolve faltered. She hesitated, her reflection quivering in the water. She saw herself as she had become. Hollow eyes, trembling hands, a stranger to her own soul. "I'll be free after this," she whispered to no one. "Everything will be mine again." But as she raised her arms to cast the baby into the depths, a sudden gust of wind lashed against her face. The baby let out a small melodic sound, half cry, half song. The river responded. Its surface began to glow faintly, waves swirling in luminous patterns. The air thickened with humidity and an otherworldly hum. Syra froze. Her instincts screamed to stop, but her envy roared louder. And then, she did it. With one desperate motion, she threw the baby into the dark, churning river. The sound of the splash was sharp, final, echoing through the night. For a single heartbeat, silence followed, until the river erupted. The waves surged upward, glistening like liquid glass. The glow beneath the surface intensified, spiraling into forms that resembled arms. Arms made of water reaching up toward the moon. Syra stumbled backward, terrified. The earth beneath her feet vibrated as if alive. A voice, soft, ancient, filled with sorrow, seemed to echo from everywhere and nowhere. "You have taken what is not yours." Syra clutched her ears, but the voice wasn't sound. It was inside her head, her bones, her breath. She turned to run, but her foot caught in the mud, pulling her down to her knees. The cold touch of river spray hit her face like tears from something divine and furious. Then, as suddenly as it began, the river went still. The glow faded. The waves quieted, and the baby was gone. Syra staggered to her feet, chest heaving. No one had seen her. The night swallowed her deed. She hurried home, mud clinging to her dress, eyes wild with panic and disbelief. When she entered the house, the silence was unbearable. Ira was still asleep, her face peaceful, unaware that her world had just ended. Syra washed her hands over and over, but the faint shimmer of the river's glow lingered on her skin, refusing to fade. That night, she couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the baby's calm gaze and heard the river's whisper. By morning, the river had changed. The villagers awoke to find Nira running high and furious, its waters darker than ever before. Fish floated lifeless near the banks, and strange silver lilies, flowers no one had seen before, bloomed along the shore. The air felt charged, as if carrying unseen electricity. When Era woke and found her child missing, her screams tore through the village like a storm. People rushed to help. They searched the fields, the trees, and finally the riverbanks. But there was no trace of the baby, only the faint shimmer of light on the surface of the water, like a reflection of the child's soul. Syra pretended to help. She cried loudly, wailed with convincing grief, tore her clothes for effect. But her tears weren't real, they were a shield. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the river was watching her. Every time she passed by it, she felt the pull of unseen eyes beneath the current. The villagers grew restless. They whispered that the river was angry, that Nira had been wronged. Offerings were made, candles lit, and prayers whispered into the wind. But nothing calmed the water. Then came the signs. On the third day after the baby's disappearance, the river began to rise unnaturally, though there had been no rain. Strange lights flickered under its surface at night like stars trapped beneath the water. Some claimed they heard a baby's laughter carried on the current. Others said they saw small footprints in the mud by the banks, leading into the river, never out. The village elders called it a curse. Era, hollow and grief-stricken, stopped eating. She would sit by the river from dawn to dusk, calling her baby's name into the wind, her voice fading day by day. The people pitied her, but no one dared speak of the divine unease that hung over the land. Syra tried to stay away, but guilt is a tide that pulls even the strongest down. Every sound of rushing water made her flinch. Every whisper of wind carried echoes of her own crime. One evening she walked to the river to pour out her fear, to face whatever haunted her. The sun was sinking, painting the water crimson. As she knelt by the edge, a cold wind rose, parting the surface slightly, just enough for her to glimpse something beneath. A pair of glowing eyes looked back at her. They weren't human. They were vast, deep, and ancient, the color of the river's heart. Syra stumbled backward, her scream lost to the wind. The water rippled softly, then went still, leaving behind a faint shimmer like a smirk. That night she dreamt again of the voice, the same soft, commanding tone. "You have awakened what was sleeping. Blood will answer blood." She woke trembling, her body cold despite the heat. Her reflection in the mirror seemed different, her eyes duller, her lips pale. It was as if the river's curse had started to seep inside her. Days turned into weeks. The village changed. Livestock grew sick, crops began to wither, and children spoke of hearing laughter in their dreams. The river, once a giver of life, had turned into something alive and vengeful. People started avoiding Syra. They didn't know what she had done, but instinct told them something dark followed her. Her own shadow seemed heavier, darker. Meanwhile, strange miracles occurred around Era. Though weak and broken, she never fell ill. The rain seemed to stop where she sat. Birds perched near her as if comforting her. And every time her tears touched the earth, tiny blue flowers bloomed. The elders began to say what no one dared before, that Era's child had not died, but transformed. that the daughter of the river goddess would return when the guilty faced judgment. Syra laughed at the rumors to mask her fear. But deep inside she knew the truth. The river had not taken the child to destroy her, it had claimed her back. Then one night the storm came. The sky cracked open with thunder, the kind that shakes the bones of the earth. The rain poured so violently that even the oldest trees bent under its weight. The villagers huddled inside, praying to survive the night. But Syra couldn't hide. The river called to her. She heard it whispering through the wind, beckoning her name with a voice that slithered through the rain. Unable to resist, she left the safety of her home and stepped into the storm. Her feet found the same path she had taken that night, the same mud, the same stones. Only this time the river was alive. The water surged upward, waves curling and twisting like serpents of light. Bolts of lightning illuminated the surface, revealing fleeting images within, faces of the lost, the drowned, and at the center of it all, the baby she had thrown away, cradled in the arms of a radiant woman made entirely of water and light. The goddess. Syra fell to her knees, rain soaking her hair, her heart hammering with terror. The goddess's eyes glowed brighter and the storm grew louder. The baby in her arms did not cry. She smiled, reaching one tiny hand toward Syra, as if offering forgiveness Syra did not deserve. But the goddess did not speak. She only raised her hand and the river responded. A whirlpool formed where Syra knelt, pulling at her dress, her legs, her soul. She screamed, clawing at the mud, begging for mercy. But mercy had left long ago. The wind howled, and somewhere through the storm Era's voice called out her baby's name, soft, broken, but heard even by the heavens. The whirlpool's pull grew stronger. The river's glow surrounded Syra, swallowing her whole. Then, silence. The storm stopped. The rain ceased. The river went still as if nothing had happened. But when the villagers stepped out the next morning, they found two strange things. The river had receded to its calm, gentle self, clear as crystal once more. And on the shore, wrapped in a woven reed cradle, lay a baby, alive, dry, and smiling. Dawn broke over the village with an uncanny stillness, as though the air itself was waiting. The river that had raged for weeks now gleamed calm and golden under the newborn sun. Birds returned to its banks, singing softly as if celebrating the end of something dark. But beneath that serenity lingered the weight of a secret about to be revealed. When the villagers found the reed cradle by the river, wrapped in woven rushes and glistening dew, their voices rose in awe. The baby inside was alive, radiant, untouched by the storm. Her skin glowed faintly, as though kissed by sunlight even in the cool of morning. Her eyes shimmered like the river's depths, holding the same mysterious calm as before. They carried her gently toward Era, who sat by the temple steps, weak from sorrow, but unbroken in spirit. The moment she saw the cradle, her hands trembled. The air around her shifted, soft, electric, sacred. As she reached out, the river itself stirred behind her, small ripples dancing across its surface. When her fingers brushed the baby's cheek, the sky brightened. The wind slowed. A warmth spread through the village, seeping into every heart that had feared, prayed, or wept. It was as though the earth exhaled relief. Era held her baby close, her tears falling silently onto the child's face. The drops shimmered like pearls, then vanished into light. But the joy that filled the air was not simple happiness, it was layered with awe, with something ancient and watching, because while Era embraced her miracle, the river whispered. At the far end of the bank, something began to form, mist swirling in slow spirals gathering shape. The villagers turned, shielding their eyes as the sunlight struck the rising fog. Within it a figure emerged, graceful, tall, and radiant. Her hair flowed like liquid silver, her eyes deep as eternity. She was both water and light, movement and stillness. The river goddess Nera had risen. No one moved. Even the birds went silent. The goddess stepped onto the shore, her feet not touching the ground. Around her the water bowed, waves folding inward in reverence. Wherever she passed, flowers bloomed, blue lilies glowing faintly in the light. Era's heart raced, but her arms tightened protectively around her baby. The goddess looked at her with infinite tenderness, her gaze that of a mother recognizing her own. Then she turned her attention toward the crowd. Behind them, shadows shifted. The villagers gasped. There stood Syra, pale, trembling, her eyes hollow and rimmed with sleepless darkness. Her body seemed drained of color, as if the river had taken all warmth from her veins. She had survived the storm, but she was not the same. Her presence drew whispers. Some crossed themselves. Others stepped away. The air around her seemed heavier, tainted with something unnatural. The goddess's gaze fixed on her, calm yet terrible. The river stirred again, a low hum rising like the growl of distant thunder. Syra fell to her knees instinctively, her face twisting in fear. The villagers looked on, uncertain. None yet knew the truth, but their instincts screamed. The water between them shimmered, forming images, memories woven in light. They saw the night of the crime, Syra creeping through the dark, the baby's calm gaze, the violent toss into the glowing water. Every detail hung in the air, undeniable. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Men bowed their heads. Era's body trembled as the vision played, yet she did not move. She simply stared, her eyes hollow but steady, as the truth finally stood naked in the dawn. Syra's breath came in shudders. She tried to speak, to plead, but no sound left her lips. The goddess raised her hand, and the water around her stilled completely. The silence was suffocating. The goddess's expression was sorrowful, not vengeful. She did not roar or curse. She simply looked, and that look alone carried the weight of judgment. The river began to rise again, not violently this time, but gracefully, wrapping around Syra's feet like translucent silk. The villagers stepped back in fear as the current climbed higher, swirling gently, almost tenderly. Syra's body shook. She tried to pull away, but her legs would not obey. The water crept up to her waist, her chest, her neck, cool, shimmering, relentless. Her eyes darted toward Era, wide with regret, begging silently for forgiveness. Era's gaze softened for a fleeting moment, not out of pity but because her heart, pure as always, could not hold hatred. Yet the goddess's justice was not swayed by mortal forgiveness. The river shimmered once more, and Syra was gone. No splash, no struggle, just stillness. The water that had claimed her smoothed over, leaving no trace, only a single blue lily floating where she had stood. The crowd fell to their knees. No one spoke. Some wept, others prayed. The goddess turned back to Era, her expression serene. She stepped closer, placing one hand over the child's heart. The baby smiled, her tiny hands reaching toward the goddess's face. A soft glow surrounded them both, spreading outward like sunlight through water. In that moment, every villager felt something awaken within them, a memory older than their lives, a truth buried beneath generations of superstition. They realized that the river had never been just a stream of water. It had been watching, loving, protecting, and punishing since the beginning of their lineage. The goddess whispered, not in sound, but in feeling, and her message settled deep in every soul. Innocence belongs to the divine. What is born of love cannot be destroyed by envy. As her form began to dissolve back into mist, she left behind a trail of glowing water that seeped into the soil. Where it touched, the ground turned fertile, flowers sprang up, and the river sang softly once more. The baby, now resting peacefully in Era's arms, cooed as if echoing the goddess's melody. Her eyes, those same eyes that once gazed into the dark, now reflected the calm of a world renewed. When the last glimmer of Nira's light faded into the morning sun, the villagers bowed deeply, their hearts heavy with awe and remorse. They built a small shrine at the river's edge that very day, marking the place where the goddess had appeared. From that moment forward, they vowed never again to let envy fester among them, for they had seen what it could awaken. And Ira, once broken by grief, became the village's quiet guardian. She raised her daughter by the river, teaching her not only to respect its power but to understand its mercy. The water always seemed to protect them. Floods never touched their home. Storms always broke before reaching their roof. At night, when the moon hung full and silver, the child would wander to the bank and dip her hands into the water. Ripples of light would follow her touch, spreading outward like the heartbeat of the goddess herself. Sometimes, the villagers would swear they saw a second figure beside the child in those moments, a faint silhouette of a woman with flowing hair and eyes like waves, watching with a mother's pride. They never spoke of Syra again. Her name was carried away by the river's song, her face forgotten by time. But every year, when the river bloomed with blue lilies, they would remember the lesson etched in their hearts. the cost of jealousy, and the mercy that even the divine can grant. And as for Era's daughter, the one born of both human love and divine blessing, she grew not into a goddess, but into something perhaps rarer, a reminder that purity, once touched by darkness, can still shine brighter than before. The river flowed on, endless and eternal, carrying with it stories, sins, and salvation, whispering to anyone who dared listen, "The river forgets nothing." Years passed, and the river healed as if time itself flowed through its veins. The village that once trembled under Nera's wrath now thrived in quiet harmony. Crops grew tall and golden. The air carried the scent of blooming lilies, and laughter once again echoed across the banks where sorrow had once lived. Yet beneath the peace there remained a sacred stillness, a shared memory no one dared to disturb. The story of that stormy night became legend. The villagers told it in hushed voices to their children, not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder that envy is a poison that corrodes the soul, and that nature watches what the heart conceals. The river, they said, was alive with memory. To look into its waters too long was to see your own truth reflected back. At the heart of this reborn land lived Ira and her daughter, Meher, the child who had once belonged to both worlds. Their home, built again near the temple steps, stood where the goddess had once appeared. The walls were simple, adorned with herbs and woven charms. Ira aged gracefully, her face soft with wisdom, her hands worn from years of tending both earth and soul. But her eyes still held the same quiet strength, the strength that had endured loss, faith, and the weight of divine revelation. Meher grew like the river itself, graceful, untamed, yet deeply calm. The villagers often whispered that when she walked, the grass turned greener beneath her feet. Wherever she went, people felt lighter, as though a silent peace followed in her steps. From a young age, she understood the rhythm of water. She spoke little, but when she touched the river, it responded, rippling in joy, curling around her hands like an old friend. The elders called her the river's daughter, and though she never sought worship, her very presence became sacred. Each morning, Ira and Meher would bring flowers to the shrine built for Nera. They would scatter petals over the surface of the water, watching as the current carried them away. Ira never forgot that the same current had once taken her child from her and returned her cleansed by divinity. In her heart, Ira held gratitude, but also a quiet ache. Some nights when the world slept, she would sit by the riverbank and listen. Beneath the murmur of flowing water, she swore she could still hear faint whispers, the goddess's voice, soft and maternal, humming lullabies older than time. It was a reminder that the bond between them was eternal, one mother of flesh, one of spirit, joined by love for the same soul. The villagers often came to Era for guidance. She never claimed to be wise, but her words carried peace. She told them that the river's justice was never about punishment, it was balance. That Nera had not taken Saira in anger, but in restoration. For envy disrupts what creation gives freely, and balance must always return. Under Era's gentle teachings, the people learned to live differently. They shared more, spoke kindly, and honored each other's blessings without bitterness. Whenever jealousy tried to take root, they remembered the night the sky broke open and the river rose to protect innocence. Over the years, Meher's connection to the river deepened. During droughts, when the water ran low, she would sit by its edge and hum softly. The next morning the river would swell again, gentle rains arriving as if summoned by her voice. The people believed it was the goddess speaking through her. Meher believed otherwise. She said it was simply love answering love, but there were still some who carried old fear. When travelers passed through and heard the tale, they asked if the goddess would rise again. Era would only smile and say, "She never left. She flows beneath us, through us, around us. The river's silence does not mean she is gone, it means she is listening." As years slipped into decades, Era's hair turned silver, matching the shimmer of the river at dawn. She watched her daughter grow into womanhood, strong and radiant. Many sought Meher's hand in marriage, but she remained patient, saying the river would choose when her heart was ready. And one evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the water gold, Meher met a young man, a traveler who had come to study the sacred waters. He was humble, kind, and fascinated by the stories of Nera. The two spent their days by the riverbanks, speaking of the balance between nature and faith. until affection quietly blossomed between them. Their union, when it came, was blessed by rain. Soft, shimmering drops that fell only on the river and the couple as they exchanged vows beneath the ancient willow tree. The villagers said it was Nira's way of offering her blessing. Era watched, her heart full. She knew then that the circle had closed, that what had once begun in grief had now returned in grace. As night descended and celebration faded into calm, Era sat by the river once more. The moon cast silver over the current, and the water's surface seemed almost to breathe. She whispered softly, not in prayer but in gratitude. "Thank you for returning what was lost," she murmured to the flowing current. A cool breeze brushed her cheek, gentle as a mother's touch. The river glowed faintly, just for a moment, and Era smiled. In the years that followed, peace endured. Children played by the riverbanks without fear. The shrine bloomed every spring with blue lilies. No one ever planted them, yet they appeared unfailingly, a yearly reminder of the goddess's mercy. Travelers came from faraway lands to see the sacred water, to touch it and feel its serenity. Many claimed it healed sorrow. Others said it showed glimpses of forgotten memories. Whatever they found, they always left changed. But the villagers knew the truth. The healing came not from the water alone, but from the lesson carved into its heart, that no cruelty remains unseen, and no innocence goes unprotected. Even after Ira's passing, her name was spoken with reverence. Meher continued her mother's rituals, her voice a soft hymn that mingled with the river's murmur. And every time she sang, the waves seemed to rise and fall in harmony, carrying her song to unseen depths. Some nights, when the moon was full, the villagers claimed they saw two silhouettes standing on the water's edge. One woman of flesh, one of light. Mother and goddess, side by side, watching over the land they had both blessed and tested. Time turned generations like pages. The story of Nira, Ira, and Meher became legend, then myth, then faith. But the river endured, whispering to all who came close enough to listen. Its voice was neither kind nor cruel. It simply told the truth. It told of a stepmother's envy and a mother's sorrow, of a divine child cast into darkness only to rise again in light, of how even the smallest act of cruelty can ripple through the world like a stone cast into still water, and how love, patient and unbroken, can heal what hate destroys. The villagers built a grand festival in honor of the river each year. They called it the Day of Renewal. At dawn, families would gather at the water's edge with candles and floating petals. They'd release them into the current, watching as hundreds of flickering lights drifted downstream, symbolizing forgiveness, remembrance, and gratitude. At the festival's center stood a statue of the goddess holding a child, the same serene expression that once appeared on that fateful dawn. And at her feet, carved into stone, were the words that became the moral of their lives. The river forgets nothing, but it forgives when hearts are pure. On those nights when the lights floated like stars upon the current, the villagers often felt a strange warmth, as if unseen hands blessed them. They would say the goddess was among them again, watching, loving, protecting. Meher, now older, would stand on the riverbank and smile at the endless flow. She understood what her mother had taught her, that the goddess was not a being to be feared, but a mirror of the heart itself. The river reflected what it was given. Kindness returned as peace, cruelty returned as chaos, and love flowed forever. As twilight deepened and the last lantern drifted away into the horizon, the water shimmered once more, softly, reverently, carrying with it whispers of every soul who had ever knelt before it. And in the hush between the waves, if one listened closely, they could still hear her voice, gentle, eternal, and filled with both warning and grace. Remember me not for the storm, but for the calm that followed. The river rippled under the moonlight, endless as memory, alive as faith, forever guarding the balance between sin and salvation. And so the story lived on, not in books, not in temples, but in the flow of water, in the breath of wind, in the quiet hearts of those who had learned to love without envy. Because once, long ago, a jealous stepmother threw a newborn into a river, and the river answered,